The warning lights on the bridge of the Galactic Enforcement Coalition cruiser, Stellar Justice, flashed red as the sensors picked up the unknown vessel. Captain Zethkar ran his four-fingered hand across the smooth controls of his command chair. His blue-scaled face showed the calm expression that had served him well through 20 years of space patrol duty. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally to his species. Lieutenant Vexanina turned from her station, her large eyes reflecting the ship's displays. "Unknown vessel detected at grid 774. Configuration matches no known design in our database. The ship appears to be of primitive construction, Captain." Zethkar stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow across the bridge. The Coalition had been expanding their territory for centuries, and first contact with new species was routine. Most primitive worlds either surrendered immediately or put up a brief fight before accepting Coalition rule. The process was always the same. "Size and armament?" he asked. "The vessel is approximately 300 meters in length. We detect minimal energy signatures. Their weapons appear to be projectile-based, Captain." Vexanina's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Metal projectiles fired by chemical reactions." Several officers on the bridge made the soft clicking sound that passed for laughter among their species. Chemical weapons were museum pieces. The Coalition had moved beyond such crude technology thousands of years ago. "Open a communication channel," Zethkar ordered. "Let us welcome another species to the galaxy." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the alien vessel. The captain studied the beings before him. They were bipedal, with pink skin and strange hair growing from their heads. 2 legs, 2 arms, and features that seemed almost comical in their simplicity. A female stepped forward. She was shorter than Zethkar, but she carried herself with confidence. "I am Ambassador Chen Wei, representing the United Earth Government. We come in peace." "I am Captain Zethkar of the Galactic Enforcement Coalition," he replied, following standard protocol. "You have entered Coalition space. By law, your vessel and all crew are now under Coalition authority." The human ambassador did not seem surprised by this statement. "We understand your position, Captain. We would like to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." Zethkar found their calm response interesting. Most primitive species either attacked immediately or begged for mercy. These humans seemed prepared for negotiation. "Very well. You may come aboard our vessel with a small delegation. Standard diplomatic immunity will be observed during our discussion." "Thank you, Captain. I will bring our security team as is customary." Within an hour, the human delegation had arrived in the Coalition ship's docking bay. Zethkar waited with a full honor guard, 20 of his best soldiers armed with plasma rifles and wearing energy shields. The weapons could cut through a meter of solid steel in seconds. The humans walked down their ship's ramp with measured steps. Ambassador Chen led the group, followed by what appeared to be their security detail. Zethkar was surprised to see only 2 soldiers accompanying the ambassador. He had expected a larger force. The human soldiers were unremarkable. They wore simple uniforms in green and brown colors. Each carried a metal weapon that looked like an antique compared to Coalition technology. The weapons appeared to fire solid projectiles using explosive charges. Zethkar had seen such devices in museums. "Welcome aboard the Stellar Justice," Zethkar said, spreading his arms in the traditional greeting. "I hope our discussion will be productive." Ambassador Chen smiled, an expression that seemed friendly despite its strangeness. "I am certain it will be, Captain." As they walked toward the conference room, Zethkar noticed how the human soldiers moved. They walked with purpose, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Their primitive weapons were held with practiced ease, as if they were extensions of their bodies. The conference room was designed to impress visiting species. High ceilings, holographic displays showing Coalition power, and enough space for large delegations. The humans seemed unimpressed by the display. "Please be seated." Zethkar gestured to the chairs around the central table. "Let us discuss your planet's integration into the Coalition." Ambassador Chen remained standing. "Captain, I think there may be some misunderstanding. Earth is not seeking integration. We are here to establish diplomatic relations." Several Coalition officers made clicking sounds of amusement. Zethkar raised a hand for silence. "Ambassador, you must understand that the Coalition has brought peace and order to thousands of worlds. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary." "I understand your perspective," Chen replied. "However, humanity has certain..." Unique characteristics that make us unsuitable for standard integration procedures. All species believe they are unique, Zethkar said patiently. The Coalition has procedures for dealing with every type of biological and cultural variation. Your species will adapt. That is where you are mistaken, Captain. The ambassador's voice remained calm, but something in her tone made Zethkar pause. Humans do not adapt to others. Others adapt to humans. The room fell silent. No species had ever made such a statement during first contact. Zethkar felt his scales bristle slightly, a sign of growing irritation. Ambassador, perhaps you do not fully understand your situation. This ship alone carries enough firepower to reduce your entire planet to molten rock. Your weapons are primitive. Your technology is centuries behind ours. What makes you think you can resist the Coalition? Ambassador Chen turned to look at her two soldiers. They had remained perfectly still during the entire conversation, like statues made of flesh. Staff Sergeant Santos, would you mind showing the captain your weapon? The female soldier stepped forward and held up her rifle. It was a simple design, metal and polymer construction with a magazine containing solid projectiles. Zethkar could see scratches and wear marks on the weapon's surface. This is a standard infantry rifle, Santos said in a clear voice. It fires a small metal projectile at high velocity. The effective range is approximately 800 meters. It can penetrate light armor but would be useless against your energy shields. Zethkar nodded. As we suspected. Primitive chemical weapons? Yes, sir, Santos replied. This weapon is over 100 years old in design. We use it because it works in any environment, requires minimal maintenance, and is simple to manufacture. Then you admit your technological inferiority, Zethkar said. Santos looked at him with an expression he could not read. Captain, you misunderstand something fundamental about human warfare. Explain. This rifle is not our weapon, sir. I am the weapon. This rifle is just a tool. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in years during first contact situations. Uncertainty. Ambassador Chen stepped forward again. Captain, perhaps we should arrange a demonstration. I believe it would be educational for both our species. What kind of demonstration? Allow Staff Sergeant Santos to show you what she means about being the weapon. It might change your perspective on humanity's capabilities. Zethkar considered the request. What harm could there be in humoring these primitive beings? Their weapons were clearly inferior. A demonstration would only confirm Coalition superiority and make the integration process smoother. Very well, he decided. We will observe your demonstration. Perhaps it will help you understand why resistance is pointless. But as he looked at the two human soldiers, Zethkar felt a strange unease. There was something in their posture, their calm confidence that did not match their primitive equipment. Something that made his instincts whisper warnings he could not quite understand. The demonstration was about to begin, and Captain Zethkar had no idea that everything he thought he knew about warfare was about to change forever. Admiral Vex Thran arrived on the Stellar Justice within hours of receiving Captain Zethkar's report about the humans. The Admiral was known throughout the Coalition for his tactical brilliance and his complete lack of patience for primitive species who refused to accept reality. Captain, Vex Thran said as he strode onto the bridge, his purple scales gleaming under the ship's lights. I understand these humans believe they can resist the Coalition. Yes, Admiral. They claim their soldiers are weapons, not their equipment. They have requested a demonstration. Vex Thran's large eyes narrowed. A demonstration? How amusing. Yes, let us observe their primitive display. It will make excellent footage for the integration archives. Other worlds will see how futile resistance truly is. The Admiral had brought his own security detail. 20 elite Coalition Marines armed with the latest plasma weapons and protected by personal energy shields. Each Marine was over 2 meters tall, genetically enhanced for combat and trained from birth for warfare. They represented the pinnacle of Coalition military might. In the ship's largest cargo bay, a space the size of a sports stadium, the demonstration area was prepared. Admiral Vex Thran took his position on an elevated observation platform, surrounded by his Marines. Below, Captain Zethkar waited with his own security team. The humans entered the bay with their same quiet confidence. Ambassador Chen walked beside her two soldiers, who carried their simple weapons and basic equipment. They looked impossibly small in the vast space surrounded by dozens of coalition troops. "Admiral Vexthran," Chen said, bowing slightly in respect. "Thank you for agreeing to observe our demonstration." "I confess I am curious," Vexthran replied, his voice carrying clearly through the bay's speakers. "Your species appears to have delusions about your military capabilities. I hope this demonstration will cure you of such fantasies." "Understanding is always the goal, Admiral," Vexthran gestured to his Marines. "Perhaps first you would like to see what real weapons can accomplish. Sergeant Crickstall, demonstrate your plasma rifle on that cargo container." A massive Marine stepped forward, raised his weapon, and fired a bolt of superheated energy. The cargo container, made of military-grade alloy, simply vanished in a flash of light and heat. Nothing remained but empty air. The coalition soldiers clicked their approval. Several aimed their weapons at other containers, reducing them to atoms with casual ease. The display of firepower was impressive by any standard. "Your turn," Vexthran said to the humans. "Show us what your antique weapons can do." Staff Sergeant Santos stepped into the center of the bay. She carried her rifle and wore her simple uniform. Beside her, Corporal Park had set down his backpack and was checking its contents. "Admiral," Santos called out, her voice clear and steady. "Before I begin, I want to make sure you understand what you are about to see. I understand that you are about to embarrass yourself with primitive technology," Vexthran replied. Santos nodded calmly. "Yes, sir. Our weapons are primitive. This rifle was designed over a century ago. It fires a small piece of metal using a chemical explosion. It cannot penetrate your energy shields. It cannot vaporize armor plating. In a direct comparison of technology, it is completely inferior to your plasma weapons." "Then why waste our time?" Admiral Vexthran asked. "Because, Admiral, this demonstration is not about the rifle." Santos began to disassemble her weapon with smooth, practiced movements. Her hands moved without hesitation, removing each component and laying it on the ground. Within 30 seconds, the rifle was completely disassembled. "Any human soldier can do this blindfolded," she said, pulling a cloth from her pocket and tying it over her eyes. "We train until the weapon becomes part of our body." Working by touch alone, she began reassembling the rifle. Her fingers found each component without hesitation, fitting them together with mechanical precision. The coalition soldiers watched in silence as she completed the task in 28 seconds. "Impressive manual dexterity," Vexthran admitted, "but still irrelevant." Santos removed the blindfold and looked up at the Admiral. "You are correct, sir. The rifle is not our weapon. Corporal Park, would you please show the Admiral what our actual equipment consists of?" Park opened his backpack and began removing items. A water purification tablet, military rations that looked like compressed bars, a basic first aid kit, a combat knife, a small sleeping bag, water bottles, a compass. Everything appeared to be simple, basic equipment. "This is the standard load for a human soldier," Park explained. 3 days of food, water purification for 2 weeks, basic medical supplies, and survival equipment. The coalition soldiers looked confused. Admiral Vexthran's expression showed his growing impatience. "Survival equipment? What does this have to do with weapons?" Ambassador Chen stepped forward. "Admiral, may I ask about your soldiers' operational capabilities?" "What do you mean? How long can a coalition Marine operate independently in hostile territory?" Vexthran considered the question. "Our Marines are supplied by orbital platforms. They carry energy cells sufficient for 48 hours of operation. After that, they must return to base for resupply. And if they cannot return to base, the mission is aborted. Marines are too valuable to risk in unsupported operations." Chen nodded slowly. "I see. Staff Sergeant Santos, how long can you operate without resupply?" Santos looked thoughtful. "Depends on the environment, ma'am. In temperate climate with water sources, indefinitely. In desert conditions, perhaps 2 weeks with careful rationing. In Arctic conditions, maybe a week if I can find shelter." "And that is with the equipment Corporal Park just showed us?" "Yes, ma'am. Though I would prefer more ammunition if possible." Admiral Vexthran leaned forward. "You claim one soldier can operate alone for weeks?" "Not just operate, Admiral," Santos replied. "Fight, move, gather intelligence, disrupt enemy operations, strike targets, evade pursuit. A human soldier is designed to be a complete weapon system that requires minimal support. Impossible. No biological organism can function at combat effectiveness for extended periods without technological support." Santos looked at Corporal Park. "Sir, What was your longest independent deployment? 73 days behind enemy lines during the Martian Colonial War. Park replied matter-of-factly. I was supposed to be extracted after 2 weeks, but complications arose. And you maintained combat effectiveness? Yes, ma'am. Completed primary and secondary objectives. Enemy never knew I was there until the final operation. The cargo bay had grown very quiet. Coalition soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. This was not how primitive species were supposed to behave. Admiral Vexithran stood up slowly. You expect me to believe that one soldier, with primitive equipment, can accomplish what requires an entire Marine platoon with technological support? Not accomplish the same thing, Admiral, Ambassador Chen said quietly. Accomplish something completely different. Something your Marines cannot do. Which is survive. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Santos picked up her rifle and checked its function with the automatic movements of long training. Admiral, she said, your Marines are magnificent warriors when they have technological support. But we are not warriors. We are survivors. There is a difference. Explain the difference. Warriors fight battles. Survivors win wars. Admiral Vexthran felt something cold forming in his stomach. Continue your demonstration. Santos nodded and began to explain human military doctrine in simple, matter-of-fact terms. As she spoke, Admiral Vexthran began to understand that he was not watching a primitive species display their crude weapons. He was receiving a lecture from an apex predator about the art of warfare, and nothing in his military training had prepared him for what he was about to learn. Staff Sergeant Santos stood in the center of the cargo bay, her disassembled rifle laid out on the ground like an exploded diagram. The Coalition soldiers watched from their positions, plasma weapons ready but lowered. Admiral Vexthran leaned forward on his observation platform, his purple scales reflecting the bay's harsh lighting. You spoke of survival, the Admiral said. Show us what that means. Santos nodded and knelt beside her equipment. Admiral, when your Marines prepare for deployment, what do they require? Full logistical support. Transport, communication, resupply, medical evacuation, orbital fire support, standard military protocol. And if any of those systems fail, the mission is compromised. Marines withdraw to secure areas for extraction. Santos picked up one of the military rations from Corporal Park's pack. It looked like a brown brick, completely unappetizing. This contains 3,000 calories and all necessary nutrients for 1 day. It tastes terrible, but it will keep a human soldier operational for 24 hours. She bit into the ration bar. The sound it made was like breaking concrete. Several Coalition soldiers made disgusted sounds as she chewed the tough material. Your soldiers eat that by choice? Admiral Vexthran asked. Not by choice, sir. By necessity. Humans evolved on a world where food was often scarce. We learned to eat anything that would not kill us and many things that would kill other species. Corporal Park handed her a water bottle. The liquid inside was murky and had an odd color. Santos drank it without hesitation. That water was taken from the ship's recycling system, she explained. It contains bacteria that would be toxic to most species. Human immune systems can handle contamination levels that would hospitalize your Marines. Admiral Vexthran's large eyes narrowed. You are showing us biological adaptation. That is not weaponry. With respect, Admiral, you are not seeing the complete picture. Santos began reassembling her rifle, her hands moving with practiced speed. Human soldiers do not carry weapons. Human soldiers are weapons. Explain. Santos finished assembling her rifle and checked its action. Admiral, how long have your Marines been awake? The question seemed odd. Vexthran looked at his security chief, who consulted a display. Standard duty rotation. 8 hours of active duty, 8 hours of rest. And they are currently at peak performance? Of course. Santos looked at Corporal Park. How long have we been awake, Corporal? Park checked his chronometer. 74 hours, Sergeant. Since we left Earth orbit. A murmur ran through the Coalition troops. Admiral Vexthran stood up from his chair. That is impossible. No biological organism can maintain combat effectiveness for 74 hours without rest. Human soldiers can operate for up to 96 hours before combat. Effectiveness begins to decline significantly. Santos replied calmly. We have chemical stimulants that can extend that to 120 hours if necessary. And after that? We sleep for 6 hours and return to duty. The cargo bay fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Admiral Vexithrin descended from his platform and walked closer to the humans. His Marines followed, weapons still ready. You are claiming biological superiority to genetically enhanced warriors. Not superiority, Admiral. Specialization. Santos shouldered her rifle and checked the sight alignment. Your Marines are optimized for conventional warfare with technological support. Humans are optimized for unconventional warfare in hostile environments. Show me. Santos looked at the various cargo containers scattered around the bay. Admiral, your Marines destroyed those containers with energy weapons. Very impressive. But they also announced their position to every enemy within 50 kilometers. She raised her rifle and fired 3 quick shots. The reports were sharp but not overwhelming. 3 small holes appeared in a cargo container across the bay. Primitive, Admiral Vexithran said. Yes, sir, but silent compared to your weapons. And the container is still intact, which means it can still be used for cover or concealment. Santos moved to a different position and fired 3 more shots. A human soldier can engage targets without revealing position, disable equipment without destroying it, and accomplish objectives without alerting enemy forces. Corporal Park had unpacked more equipment. A thin wire, some small electronic devices, basic tools. Admiral, may I demonstrate human engineering capabilities? Proceed. Park approached one of the cargo containers that had been damaged by plasma fire. The metal was still glowing from the heat. Using his tools, he began working on the container's locking mechanism. Your weapons destroyed the containers completely, he said as he worked. But sometimes destruction is not the objective. Sometimes you need to access the contents without alerting the enemy. Within 5 minutes, he had opened the damaged container without making any noise or causing any visible change to its exterior. A human soldier can gain access to enemy equipment, gather intelligence, plant tracking devices, or sabotage systems without leaving evidence of intrusion. Admiral Vexithran examined Park's work. The container appeared untouched from the outside, but the locking mechanism had been completely bypassed. Impressive technique, but this is specialized training, not biological capability. Actually, Admiral, this is basic human problem-solving, Ambassador Chen said, stepping forward. Humans evolved as tool users on a hostile world. Every human child learns to adapt available materials to solve problems. Your planet is hostile? Extremely hostile. Earth has predators that hunt humans, weather that can kill in minutes, diseases that our ancestors had no technology to cure, and natural disasters that can destroy entire regions. Chen's voice remained calm, but something in her tone made the coalition soldiers shift nervously. Yet you survived. We did more than survive, Admiral. We became the dominant species on our planet by learning to use everything as a weapon and every environment as an advantage. Santos had finished her demonstration with the rifle. She set it aside and picked up the combat knife from Park's equipment. It was a simple blade, steel and polymer handle with a matte black finish. This knife was forged using techniques that are 3,000 years old, she said, testing the blade's edge. It requires no maintenance beyond basic sharpening. It will function in any environment, from Arctic cold to desert heat. It makes no noise, leaves no energy signature, and can be manufactured in any primitive workshop. She demonstrated several techniques with the blade, moving through combat forms that were clearly the result of extensive training. The movements were efficient, deadly, and completely silent. In the hands of a human soldier, this knife is effective against enemies wearing advanced armor, electronic systems, or energy shields. It requires no ammunition, produces no waste heat, and never runs out of power. Admiral Vexithran watched the demonstration with growing unease. You are describing insurgency tactics. Yes, sir. Humans excel at insurgency because we evolved as persistence hunters. We track prey for days, study their habits, learn their weaknesses, and strike when they are most vulnerable. And you apply this to warfare? Santos looked directly at the Admiral. Admiral, humans do not fight wars to win battles. We fight wars to make sure our enemies can never threaten us again. The words carried a weight that made the cargo bay feel smaller. Several coalition Marines took involuntary steps backward. Explain that statement, Admiral Vexithran demanded. Ambassador Chen moved to stand beside her soldiers. Admiral, the coalition fights wars to expand territory and establish dominance. Those are political objectives with military solutions. Yes, that is the nature of warfare. Human warfare has a different objective. We fight to ensure the survival of our species. That is not a political objective. It is a biological imperative. Admiral Vexithran felt his scales bristling, a sign of stress his species showed when facing serious threats. You are describing total war. Yes, Admiral. When humans fight, we fight completely. Every human becomes a soldier. Every resource becomes a weapon. Every tactic becomes acceptable. We continue fighting until the threat to our species is eliminated. Santos had finished her knife demonstration. She cleaned the blade and returned it to its sheath. Admiral, would you like to see what human soldiers are really capable of? What do you mean? Everything I have shown you so far assumes we are operating under rules of engagement appropriate for diplomatic contact. We have been polite, careful not to damage your ship and mindful of our status as guests. Admiral Vexithran felt something cold spreading through his body. And without those restrictions? Santos looked at Corporal Park. Park checked his chronometer again and nodded. Without restrictions, Admiral Corporal Park and I could disable this ship, eliminate your security forces, and capture key personnel for intelligence purposes. Estimated time to completion, 12 minutes. The cargo bay erupted in shocked clicking from the Coalition soldiers. Several raised their weapons. Admiral Vexithran held up a hand for silence. That is impossible. You have primitive weapons and no support. Yes, sir. That is what makes it possible. Ambassador Chen stepped forward before the situation could escalate further. Admiral Staff Sergeant Santos is not making a threat. She is providing information about human capabilities for your consideration. Consideration of what? Whether the Coalition really wants to fight a war against 8 billion apex predators who have spent their entire evolutionary history learning to kill things that are bigger, stronger, and better armed than they are. The silence in the cargo bay stretched like a taut wire. Admiral Vexithran stood among his elite Marines, all of them armed with weapons that could vaporize matter, yet somehow he felt vulnerable. The three humans before him had not moved, had not raised their primitive weapons, but the atmosphere had changed completely. You claim you could capture this ship, Admiral Vexithran said carefully. I find that difficult to believe. Staff Sergeant Santos tilted her head slightly. Admiral, would you like me to explain how? That would be educational. Santos looked around the cargo bay, her eyes taking in details that had seemed unimportant before. First, we disable your power grid. Corporal Park has identified 3 critical junction points that are accessible through maintenance shafts. Standard human demolitions training includes improvised explosives using common materials. She pointed to various items scattered around the bay. Cleaning supplies from your maintenance lockers combined with metal fragments and a small electrical charge create effective directed explosives. We disable your main power, backup power, and emergency power in sequence. Admiral Vexithran looked at the items she indicated. They were ordinary ship supplies, nothing that would normally be considered dangerous. Our backup systems would prevent total power loss. Yes, sir. But power fluctuations would disrupt your energy shields and plasma weapon charging systems. During those disruptions, our projectile weapons become effective against your armor. Corporal Park had moved to examine one of the wall panels. Admiral, your Marines are wearing excellent armor, but it is designed to stop energy weapons and explosive fragments. These. He tapped his ammunition pouches. These bullets are designed to penetrate solid barriers using kinetic energy. Your armor would stop maybe 60% of our shots, and the other 40% would disable or kill your Marines, sir. The matter-of-fact way Park delivered this information was somehow more disturbing than any threat. Admiral Vexithran felt his breathing becoming irregular. Continue, he managed. Santos resumed her explanation. With your soldiers neutralized and your ship's power systems damaged, we control movement through the corridors. Standard human tactics involve creating choke points, using cover and concealment, and forcing enemies into predetermined killing zones. She walked to one of the bay's exits and examined the corridor beyond. Your ship's design assumes enemies will use energy weapons that require line-of-sight targeting. Our weapons can ricochet off walls, penetrate through lightweight barriers, and engage targets from unexpected angles. You have studied our ship design? No, Admiral. We have studied engineering principles. All ships must balance protection with mobility, power distribution with redundancy, crew comfort with defensive capability. These compromises create vulnerabilities that human soldiers are trained to exploit. Ambassador Chen moved to stand beside her soldiers. Admiral, may I provide some context about human military doctrine? Please do. Human warfare evolved from hunting strategies that developed over millions of years. We learned to hunt animals that were faster, stronger, and more dangerous than individual humans. Our solution was to become pack hunters with long-term planning capabilities. Pack hunting? Coordinated group tactics. When humans fight together, we do not simply add our individual capabilities, we multiply them. 2 human soldiers are not twice as effective as 1 human soldier. They are 4 times as effective. 3 human soldiers are 9 times as effective. Admiral Vex Thran looked at Santos and Park. Only 2 soldiers, but according to Chen's explanation, they functioned as a unit multiplied beyond their individual capabilities. How is this multiplication achieved? Santos answered. Admiral Corporal Park and I have trained together for 6 years. We can communicate without speaking. We can coordinate actions without planning. We can anticipate each other's movements and responses. Park nodded. In combat, we function as a single organism with multiple bodies. I know what the sergeant will do before she does it. She knows what I am thinking before I speak. And this is standard for human soldiers? Yes, sir, Santos replied. Human military units form what we call squad cohesion. Soldiers become so familiar with each other that they operate by instinct. Individual humans are dangerous. Human units are exponentially more dangerous. Admiral Vexithran tried to process this information. Coalition Marines were trained for individual excellence and followed strict command protocols. The idea of soldiers who could read each other's minds was completely foreign. You mentioned long-term planning, he said to Ambassador Chen. Human warfare operates on multiple timescales simultaneously, Chen explained. We plan for immediate tactical objectives, medium-term strategic goals, and long-term species survival. Other species fight battles. Humans design wars. What does that mean? Santos and Park exchanged a look that confirmed Chen's explanation about nonverbal communication. Park spoke first. Admiral, this demonstration is not random. We have been gathering intelligence about coalition capabilities since the moment we boarded your ship. What intelligence? Ship design, crew size, reaction times, command structure, technology limitations, tactical doctrine, and psychological profiles of key personnel, Santos listed. Standard reconnaissance protocol. Admiral Vex Thran felt his scales darkening, a stress response he could not control. You have been spying on us during diplomatic negotiations? Yes, sir. Humans do not separate diplomacy from warfare. They are different tools used to achieve the same objective, which is, Ambassador Chen answered, ensuring human survival by understanding potential threats and developing countermeasures. The cargo bay suddenly felt like a trap. Admiral Vex Thran realized that while he had been observing a demonstration, the humans had been conducting a military reconnaissance mission. What countermeasures have you developed? He asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know. Admiral, Chen said carefully, humans have been preparing for contact with hostile alien species for over a century. Every human colony ship carries weapons designed specifically for fighting enemies with unknown capabilities. What kind of weapons? Santos resumed the explanation. Weapons that exploit universal physical principles. Kinetic penetrators that work regardless of armor type. Chemical agents that disrupt biological processes. Electromagnetic pulses that disable electronic systems. Nuclear devices for area denial. Nuclear weapons are banned by galactic law. Human colonies are not signatories to galactic law, Admiral. We developed our weapons before we knew galactic law existed. Park had finished examining the wall panel and returned to his equipment. Admiral, every human settlement is designed to resist orbital bombardment, support long-term siege conditions, and continue military operations even after complete infrastructure destruction. You are describing fortress worlds. We prefer the term prepared settlements, Chen said. Humans learned long ago that peace is temporary, but preparation is permanent. Admiral Vex Thran looked around his cargo bay with new eyes. His ship carried enough firepower to destroy cities. His Marines were genetically enhanced super soldiers, and his technology was thousands of years ahead of human capabilities. But somehow he felt outgunned. How many humans are there? He asked. 8 billion on Earth, Chen replied. 2 billion in the colonial settlements. 10 billion individuals. 10 billion soldiers, Admiral. Every human above the age of 12 receives basic military training. Every human settlement maintains weapon stockpiles and defensive installations. Every human colony ship is designed to fight as a warship if necessary. Santos had reassembled her equipment and stood ready. Admiral, the Coalition has impressive military capabilities for fighting conventional wars against conventional enemies. But humans are not conventional. What are humans? We are the species that survived when everything on our planet tried to kill us. We are the species that turned a hostile world into our hunting ground. We are the species that looks at any situation and asks, how can I use this to kill my enemies? Park shouldered his pack. Admiral, humans do not fight fair. We fight to win. We use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and continue fighting until our enemies surrender or die. And if we do not surrender? Ambassador Chen looked directly at Admiral Vexthran. Then you die, Admiral. All of you. Every coalition world, every coalition ship, every coalition citizen. We fight until the threat is eliminated completely. That would be genocide. No, Admiral. That would be survival. Humans do not fight for territory or resources or political power. We fight to ensure that our children have a future. When human survival is threatened, we become something your species has never encountered, which is 8 billion apex predators working together toward a single goal. The cargo bay fell silent again. Admiral Vexthran stood surrounded by his Marines and his ship, protected by technology the humans could barely understand. But for the first time in his military career, he felt like prey, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, the Coalition had made a terrible mistake by threatening these creatures called humans. Admiral Vexthran stood in the cargo bay, his purple scales now so dark they appeared almost black. Around him, his elite Marines held their plasma weapons with hands that trembled slightly. The 3 humans before them had not moved, had not threatened, had simply explained, and that explanation had changed everything. Admiral, Staff Sergeant Santos said quietly, you asked what humans are capable of. Would you like to know what we have already done? I am not certain I do, Vexthran replied honestly. Ambassador Chen stepped forward. Admiral, this ship is not humanity's first contact with the Coalition. The words hit Admiral Vexthran like a physical blow. What do you mean? 3 months ago, a Coalition survey vessel encountered a human colony ship at the edge of what you call Sector 7. The survey vessel followed standard protocol and demanded surrender. And? The colony ship complied. 2,000 human civilians were taken aboard the Coalition vessel for processing. Admiral Vexthran felt something cold forming in his stomach. What happened to them? They were transported to Processing Station Gamma 7 for integration into Coalition labor pools. Standard procedure for primitive species? Yes, that is standard procedure. Ambassador Chen's expression remained calm, but something in her eyes made Admiral Vexthran step backward. Admiral, those 2,000 civilians included 400 children under the age of 10. Integration procedures apply to all members of newly contacted species. Human children are not suitable for integration, Admiral. They are suitable for protection, by any means necessary. The cargo bay's air circulation system created the only sound for several long seconds. Admiral Vexthran felt his breathing becoming shallow. Continue, he managed. Processing Station Gamma 7 stopped responding to communications 2 weeks ago. Coalition Command assumed it was a technical malfunction and sent a repair ship. And the repair ship found the station intact but empty. No Coalition personnel, no processing equipment, no records of what had happened. The station's computers had been completely wiped. Corporal Park spoke for the first time in several minutes. The Coalition personnel were not killed, Admiral. They were relocated. Relocated where? Earth. They are currently guests of the United Earth government receiving education about human customs and cultural values. Admiral Vexthran's large eyes widened. You kidnapped an entire Coalition facility? We rescued our people and detained yours for their own protection, Ambassador Chen corrected. The Coalition personnel are safe and well treated. They are learning why it is unwise to threaten human children. Santos picked up her rifle and checked its action with automatic movements. Admiral, the humans on that colony ship were farmers, teachers, scientists, and engineers. Civilians with no military training. But they were still human, Admiral Vexthran said, beginning to understand. Yes, sir. Every human is a potential soldier. Every human knows how to fight. Every human will fight to protect children. How did civilians capture a Coalition military facility? Park answered. patience, planning, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary. Human civilians studied coalition procedures for 2 weeks. They learned guard rotations, identified critical systems, and waited for the optimal moment. And then, they acted like humans, Admiral. They used improvised weapons, coordinated group tactics, and fought until they won. Ambassador Chen moved to stand between her soldiers and the coalition Marines. Admiral, this diplomatic mission serves 2 purposes. The first is to negotiate the return of our people from your processing station, and the second, to deliver a message to Coalition Command. Admiral Vexthron felt his scales bristling again. What message? That humanity is not interested in joining the Coalition. We are not interested in being processed, integrated, or absorbed. We are interested in being left alone. The Coalition does not leave primitive species alone. It is not our policy. Santos looked directly at Admiral Vexthron. Then you need a new policy, sir. You cannot threaten the entire Coalition with 3 people and primitive weapons. We are not threatening the Coalition, Admiral, Ambassador Chen said patiently. We are providing information about probable outcomes if current policies continue. Explain these outcomes. Chen gestured to her soldiers. Admiral, this ship contains 50 human personnel. We are a diplomatic mission, not a military force. Yet you have expressed concern about our capabilities. Yes. Every human colony ship carries a minimum of 10,000 personnel. Every human settlement has at least 50,000 residents. Earth has 8 billion humans. The mathematics were simple, but the implications were staggering. Admiral Vexthron tried to imagine facing 10,000 humans with the capabilities he had just witnessed. You are suggesting that resistance is possible. Admiral, resistance is inevitable. Humans do not surrender. We do not accept subjugation. We do not integrate into other species' civilizations. Chen's voice remained calm, but it carried absolute certainty. If the Coalition attempts to force these things, we will fight. And if you lose, Santos answered. Humans do not lose wars, Admiral. We escalate until we win. What does escalation mean? Park had finished checking his equipment. Admiral, human colonies are equipped with weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Not because we are aggressive, but because we are thorough. That is impossible. Stellar engineering is not particularly complex once you understand the underlying physics, Ambassador Chen said. Humans have had nuclear weapons for over a century. Scaling up is primarily a matter of resources and determination. Admiral Vexthron felt reality shifting around him. The Coalition had technologies that seemed like magic to primitive species, but these humans were describing capabilities that seemed like nightmares. You would destroy stars? If necessary to protect human children, yes. Chen's answer was delivered with the same tone she might use to discuss the weather. Admiral, humans are very simple to understand. We have one priority above all others, the survival and safety of our young. Everything else is negotiable, including your own lives, especially our own lives. The cargo bay fell silent again. Admiral Vexthron looked at his Marines, all of them warriors bred and trained for combat. Then he looked at the humans who claimed that civilian farmers could capture military installations. What do you want? He asked finally. The immediate release of all humans currently in Coalition custody, Ambassador Chen said. A formal agreement that human space is off limits to Coalition expansion. And a mutual non-aggression pact with protocols for peaceful contact. And if the Coalition refuses, Santos shouldered her rifle, then humanity will assume that the Coalition represents an existential threat to human survival. And then? Then we solve the problem, Admiral. Permanently. Admiral Vexthron stood in his own ship, surrounded by his own soldiers, protected by technology thousands of years ahead of human capabilities. But he felt like he was standing at the edge of an abyss. I will convey your message to Coalition Command, he said quietly. Thank you, Admiral. We hope they will consider it carefully. And if they do not? Ambassador Chen looked at her 2 soldiers, then back at Admiral Vexthron. Then they will learn why humans call themselves the most dangerous species in the galaxy. You are not the most dangerous species. You are primitive. Admiral, Santos said, we are primitive in technology, but we are apex predators in warfare. There is a difference. The Coalition has conquered thousands of worlds. The Coalition has conquered thousands of species that wanted to survive. Park corrected. You have never fought a species that was willing to die. Admiral Vexthron felt his certainty crumbling. Everything he thought he knew about warfare, about primitive species, about coalition superiority, was being systematically dismantled by three beings with simple weapons and calm voices. "I will recommend that Coalition Command consider your terms," he said. "That is all we ask." "Admiral." As the humans prepared to leave, Admiral Vex Thran found himself hoping that Coalition Command would listen to his recommendation. Because for the first time in his career, he understood what it meant to encounter a species that was not afraid to fight, and he suspected that humanity had been very careful to show him only a tiny fraction of what they were truly capable of. The thought terrified him more than he cared to admit. Hours later, as the human ship departed Coalition space, Admiral Vex Thran began drafting a report that would change everything. At the top of the document, he wrote a single line that summarized everything he had learned. "Recommend immediate reclassification of humans from primitive species to apex predator." Extreme caution advised. He paused, then added one more line. "They are not like us. They are something much more dangerous."